A desperate German Shepherd stops traffic to beg for his owner's rescue. His actions saved 3 lives. But what really happened on that bridge? It all starts when a loyal dog suddenly runs into speeding cars, bringing a busy city to a dead stop. Drivers are furious until they see the blood on his fur. He isn't causing chaos. He's begging for help. And when one man finally follows him, everything spirals into a shocking mystery no one saw coming. A hidden danger. A silent cry for help. And a truth buried beneath the bridge that could destroy lives if it isn't found in time. Why was the dog the only one who tried to save her? And what secret was someone willing to spill blood to keep hidden? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Sophia Caro slumped in her office chair, staring at the stack of manila folders sprawled across her desk. Each one held the story of a young girl who had vanished without a trace over the past 6 months. Her eyes burned from hours of reviewing case notes, searching for connections that her colleagues insisted weren't there. "They're runaways, Caro," Detective Matthews had said earlier that day, barely glancing up from his computer screen. "Teenage girls with troubled homes. They take off all the time. They'll turn up eventually." Sophia's fingers curled into fists beneath her desk. 7 girls in 6 months, all from the same 3-block radius? That's not normal, and you know it. "Look," Matthews had sighed, finally meeting her eyes with barely concealed impatience. "These kids have histories. Foster homes, drug problems, juvenile records. They're not exactly honor students." The memory of his dismissive tone made Sophia's jaw clench. She gathered the folders, sliding them into her worn leather messenger bag. The office had emptied hours ago, the fluorescent lights humming in the silence. Her supervisor had left early, brushing off Sophia's attempts to discuss the pattern she'd discovered. "You're too emotionally involved," Mrs. Henderson had said, already halfway out the door. "Take the weekend off, clear your head." Sophia checked her watch. 8:30 in the evening, another late night. She shouldered her bag and made her way through the dim hallways of the social services building. Her footsteps echoed against the linoleum floors, each step heavy with the weight of responsibility she couldn't shake. The parking lot was nearly empty, her old Honda Civic sitting alone under a flickering streetlight. The autumn air bit through her light jacket as she walked to her car. She'd forgotten her heavier coat again, too preoccupied with the morning's frustrating meetings to remember it. The drive home took her along the river, past warehouses and industrial buildings that lined the waterfront. Most were dark at this hour, their corrugated metal walls reflecting the orange glow of scattered security, lights. But something caught her eye. Movement near one of the loading docks of the Peterson storage facility. Sophia slowed her car, squinting through the gathering darkness. 2 men were loading what looked like large crates into a white van. That wasn't unusual in itself, but the hour was odd for a storage facility that normally closed at 5. As she watched, one of the men glanced furtively over his shoulder, scanning the street. Her instincts, honed by years of social work, prickled with unease. She memorized the van's location and the building number, making a mental note to drive by again during daylight hours. Then she forced herself to continue driving, not wanting to draw attention. "You're getting paranoid," she muttered to herself, but the knot in her stomach wouldn't ease. 15 minutes later, Sophia pulled into her apartment complex's parking lot. The familiar sight of her second-floor walk-up brought some comfort, but it wasn't until she heard excited scratching at her door that her shoulders truly began to relax. "I'm coming, Zeus," she called softly, fishing her keys from her bag. The moment she opened the door, 80 pounds of German Shepherd pressed against her legs, tail wagging with unbridled joy. Zeus's amber-brown eyes studied her face with the uncanny perception that had drawn her to him at the shelter 3 years ago. "Hey, buddy." Sophia dropped to her knees, burying her face in his thick fur. Zeus whined softly, nudging her cheek with his cold nose. He always seemed to know when she'd had a rough day. Sophia had found Zeus abandoned near a construction site, ribs showing through his coat. After no one claimed him, she'd adopted him herself and discovered his natural talent for tracking. A friend in search and rescue had helped train him in basic skills, though they'd never joined a formal team. "At least you believe me when something's wrong," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. Zeus's tail thumped against the floor in agreement. Sophia moved through her evening routine on autopilot, feeding Zeus, reheating leftover pasta, changing into comfortable clothes, but her mind kept returning to those missing girls. Melissa Thompson, 14, disappeared walking home from the corner store. Tanya Williams, 15, vanished between her bus stop and her foster home. Sarah Chen, 16, last seen leaving her after-school job at the library. All of them dismissed as runaways, all of them written off because of their circumstances. Sophia spread the case files across her small dining table, Zeus settling at her feet with a contented sigh. She pinned a map to her corkboard, marking each girl's last known location with red pushpins. The pattern was there, clear as day to anyone who bothered to look. How could no one else see it? Her eyes drifted to the window, toward the river where she'd seen the suspicious activity. The warehouse district was only a few blocks from where several of the girls had disappeared. It could be nothing. Or it could be another piece of the puzzle everyone else refused to acknowledge. Zeus raised his head suddenly, ears perking forward. He got to his feet and padded to the window, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Sophia joined him, peering into the darkness. The parking lot below was empty, except for a few cars she recognized as belonging to her neighbors. But Zeus continued to stare intently into the night, his posture alert and wary. Sophia double-checked her door locks and drew the curtains, trying to shake off her growing unease. She was letting her imagination run wild, seeing connections where there might be none. And yet, she thought of Melissa Thompson's mother, clutching a school photo and insisting through tears that her daughter would never run away. Of Tanya Williams' foster parents, describing how the girl had been excited about her upcoming birthday, making plans for the future. Of Sarah Chen's carefully maintained perfect attendance record, now marred by unexplained absences. These weren't just cases. They were girls with dreams, with people who loved them, with futures that had been stolen, and no one in authority seemed to care. Sophia returned to her files, Zeus settling back at her feet but remaining vigilant. She would keep digging, keep pushing, keep searching for answers. Someone had to stand up for these girls, even if it meant standing alone. Outside her window, the city settled into its nighttime rhythm, unaware of the darkness that might be lurking in its shadows. Sophia Caro sat at her table, surrounded by evidence of a pattern only she could see, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Zeus pressed his warm body against her legs, offering silent support as she worked late into the night. Tomorrow she would drive by that warehouse again, in daylight this time. Tomorrow she would keep fighting against the system's indifference. Tomorrow she would continue her search for answers. But for now, she sat in her quiet apartment, finding comfort in Zeus's steady presence as she pieced together the puzzle that everyone else refused to see. The setting sun cast long shadows across the waterfront as Sophia Caro parked her car 3 blocks from the warehouse district. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she double-checked the video settings on her phone. Zeus wasn't with her tonight. She'd left him at home, not wanting to risk his safety on what could be a dangerous reconnaissance mission. "Just get the evidence and get out," she whispered to herself, tucking her phone into her jacket pocket. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders as she stepped out into the cool evening air. Sophia stuck to the shadows, grateful for her dark clothing and sensible shoes. The warehouse district was eerily quiet at this hour, with most of the legitimate businesses closed for the day. Her footsteps echoed softly against the concrete as she made her way toward the building she'd noticed earlier. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Two men emerged from a side door, their faces familiar in a way that made her blood run cold. She'd seen them before, in the background of case photos, lingering near schools and bus stops where girls had later disappeared. Sophia's heart pounded as she ducked behind a stack of empty pallets, carefully positioning her phone to record. More men joined the first two, speaking in low voices that carried across the empty lot. Sophia's fingers trembled as she zoomed in, capturing clear shots of their faces. A white van pulled up, its headlights off. The back doors opened, and Sophia had to stifle a gasp as she saw what looked like young girls being hurried inside. This is it, she thought, her suspicions confirmed in the worst possible way. This is what's happening to them. She was so focused on getting the evidence that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. A rough hand clamped over her mouth, another yanking her phone away. Sophia fought back instantly, her elbow connecting with her attacker's ribs. She broke free and ran, but more shadows materialized from the darkness. Pain exploded in her side. Sophia looked down to see a knife blade withdrawing, her dark jacket growing darker with blood. She tried to scream, but another blow sent her crashing to the ground. Her phone skittered across the pavement, the screen shattering as one of her attackers stomped on it deliberately. "Should have minded your own business, social worker," a voice growled. Sophia recognized it, one of the men she'd interviewed months ago about a missing 15-year-old. She'd known he was lying then. Now she knew why. They dragged her toward the bridge, her attempts to fight back growing weaker as blood soaked her clothing. Sophia's vision blurred, but she forced herself to memorize details: faces, voices, the sound of water below. The service shaft appeared ahead, a dark maw in the bridge's foundation. The men pulled open the heavy metal door. Sophia summoned her remaining strength and lashed out, managing to catch one attacker in the face with her heel. He cursed, his grip loosening just enough for her to twist away. But the movement sent fresh agony through her wound, and she stumbled. That's when she heard it, a familiar bark, followed by snarling. Zeus had followed her after all. The massive German shepherd burst from the shadows, teeth bared. The men scattered in surprise, giving Sophia precious seconds to drag herself away from the shaft's entrance. "Zeus, run!" she gasped, knowing he'd lead others to her if he survived. One of the men swung a pipe at the dog, but Zeus was too quick. He darted between them, snapping and snarling, creating enough chaos for Sophia to pull herself behind a concrete pillar. The last thing she saw was Zeus disappearing into the night, pursued by two of the men. The others returned for her, and this time she couldn't fight as they hauled her into the service shaft. They left her there, slumped against the damp wall, her blood leaving dark trails on the concrete. Sophia pressed her hand against her wound, trying to stay conscious. The shaft was pitch black, the only sound water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Her phone was destroyed, she was bleeding badly, and no one knew where she was. But Zeus was out there. Zeus would find help. He had to. Her thoughts grew foggy as blood loss took its toll. Sophia forced herself to focus on breathing, on staying awake, on holding on to hope. She thought of the girls she'd seen being loaded into the van, of all the others who had disappeared. She had to survive to tell someone what she'd discovered. The darkness seemed to pulse around her, and Sophia felt herself sliding in and out of consciousness. The cold from the concrete seeped into her bones, and her fingers were growing numb where they pressed against her wound. She tried to call out, but her voice emerged as barely a whisper. Water continued to drip somewhere in the blackness. Sophia's head drooped forward, then jerked up as she fought to stay awake. But consciousness was slipping away like water through her fingers, and the darkness was becoming heavier, more absolute. Her last coherent thought was of Zeus, her loyal, brave Zeus, running through the night. She had to hold on. She had to survive. She had to make sure those girls got justice. The service shaft's darkness swallowed her whole as Sophia lost her battle to stay conscious, her body slumping further down the wall, her breath becoming shallow and uneven. The truth she'd discovered might die with her here in this concrete tomb beneath the bridge, unless Zeus could somehow bring help in time. Zeus's heart pounded as he raced through the darkened streets, his powerful legs carrying him as fast as they could go. The German shepherd's normally pristine coat was matted with sweat and dirt from his narrow escape, but none of that mattered. All that mattered was Sophia, his human, his friend, his whole world, bleeding and alone in that terrible dark place. Two of the men had chased him for several blocks, but Zeus had easily outmaneuvered them, ducking through alleys and underneath fences until their angry shouts faded into the night. Now he was running with desperate purpose, his keen mind focused on the one place he knew would have the most humans, the Riverside Bridge during rush hour. The evening air carried the sounds of heavy traffic ahead, hundreds of cars crawling across the bridge as people made their way home from work. Zeus's muscles burned as he pushed himself harder, his breath coming in ragged pants. The bridge's lights grew closer, and he could see the endless stream of headlights moving slowly in both directions. Without hesitation, Zeus burst onto the bridge's main span. Car horns blared as he weaved between vehicles, searching for the perfect spot to make his stand. The German shepherd's training kicked in. He needed to create a situation that couldn't be ignored, that would force humans to stop and pay attention. Zeus spotted his opportunity, a small gap between two lanes of traffic. He planted himself firmly in the center of the bridge and began barking with every ounce of strength he had left. A red sports car swerved to avoid him, horn blasting. The driver behind it slammed on their brakes, causing a chain reaction of screeching tires and crunching metal. "What the hell?" a man shouted, climbing out of his car. "Somebody get that dog out of here!" But Zeus stood his ground, continuing to bark while trying to convey the urgency he felt. More drivers were emerging from their vehicles now, some angry, others confused, and a few pulling out their phones to record the unusual scene. "Is that a police dog?" someone asked, noticing Zeus's athletic build and intense focus. "Look at how he's acting. Something's wrong," a woman called out, her phone raised to capture video. Zeus turned in circles, barking at different groups of people, then running a few steps towards the end of the bridge before returning to bark more. His training had taught him to guide people to those who needed help, but getting humans to understand and follow was proving frustratingly difficult. A delivery truck driver approached cautiously, holding out his hand. "Hey boy, it's okay. Come here." Zeus backed away, his barks becoming more urgent. He could feel precious minutes slipping away while Sophia lay bleeding. The crowd around him was growing larger as traffic came to a complete standstill. Some people were arguing about what to do, while others were calling the police about the accident and the dog causing it. "Someone must be hurt," an older woman said, watching Zeus's frantic behavior. "My daughter trains search and rescue dogs. This one's trying to tell us something." "Or it's just a stray causing trouble," a businessman countered, straightening his tie in frustration. "I'm going to be late for dinner." Zeus let out a howl of frustration. He ran to the nearest person who seemed sympathetic, a young woman who had been talking about search and rescue dogs, and gently took her sleeve in his teeth, trying to pull her toward the end of the bridge. "Look!" she exclaimed. "He wants us to follow him!" More phones were recording now, as Zeus continued his desperate attempts to communicate. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the general chaos of horns, voices, and his own barking. Police cars were working their way through the traffic jam from both ends of the bridge. A police officer emerged from one of the cruisers, speaking into his radio. "Dispatch, we've got multiple vehicle accidents and some kind of situation with a dog. Looks like a German Shepherd, possibly a working dog based on behavior." Zeus recognized the uniform. He'd seen similar ones around Sofia many times. These were people who helped others. He ran to the officer, barking insistently, then running back toward the bridge's end, where Sofia lay hidden in darkness. "That dog's covered in dirt," another officer observed, moving closer. "And what's that on its fur? Is that blood?" Zeus barked again, relieved that someone had finally noticed. He repeated his motion of running a few steps away, then returning to bark more. The first officer spoke quietly to his partner, then approached Zeus with careful movements. "Okay, boy," he said in a calm voice. "You trying to show us something?" The crowd had grown even larger now, with dozens of phones recording the scene. The traffic jam stretched in both directions as far as anyone could see. Zeus had succeeded in stopping the world in its tracks. Now he just needed them to understand why. He approached the officer who had spoken to him, making eye contact the way Sofia had taught him. Then he turned and took several deliberate steps toward where she lay injured, looking back to make sure the officer was watching. "I think we should follow him," the officer said to his partner. "Something's definitely not right here. Call for animal control to assist, but I'm going to see where he leads us." Zeus's heart leaped with hope. Finally, someone was listening. He moved forward again, checking frequently to ensure the officer was following. More police had arrived to deal with the traffic situation and the minor accidents, leaving the first two officers free to investigate. The gathered crowd watched in fascination as Zeus led the officers toward the end of the bridge, many still filming with their phones. The German Shepherd's entire body trembled with urgency. He had done what Sofia had trained him to do, creating a situation that would bring help. Now he just prayed they would reach her in time. The evening traffic remained at a standstill on the Riverside Bridge, dozens of cars honking uselessly at the gridlock. But Zeus didn't care about the chaos he'd caused. His entire world had narrowed to a single purpose, leading these humans to Sofia before it was too late. As they moved away from the traffic jam, Zeus's pace quickened. The officers followed, speaking quietly into their radios, alert for whatever situation they might be walking into. Behind them, the sound of more sirens approached as additional emergency vehicles arrived to deal with the bridge situation. Zeus had succeeded in getting everyone's attention. Now he just had to make sure it saved Sofia's life. The chaos on Riverside Bridge continued to escalate as more drivers emerged from their vehicles, their angry voices filling the early evening air. Among them was Jonas Keene, who had been making his last delivery of the day when traffic ground to a halt. Unlike the others who were focused on their phones or shouting about delays, Jonas's attention was drawn to the German Shepherd moving frantically through the crowd. Something about the dog's behavior stirred memories from his EMT days. The way it moved wasn't random or aggressive. It was purposeful, desperate. Jonas watched as the animal approached different people, only to be shooed away with angry gestures or fearful steps backward. "Get that mutt off the bridge," someone shouted from a few cars ahead. "Someone call animal control," another voice demanded. Jonas stepped away from his delivery van, ignoring the horn blasts and cursing from drivers behind him. The dog was closer now, and Jonas could see what others were missing in their frustration. Dark stains on the animal's fur that looked disturbingly like blood. "Hey there," Jonas called softly, kneeling despite the rough asphalt digging into his worn jeans. "What's wrong, buddy?" The German Shepherd's ears perked up at his gentle tone. The dog approached cautiously, and Jonas noticed something clutched in its mouth, a torn piece of fabric that looked like it came from a sweater or cardigan. The material was also stained with what appeared to be blood. "Sir, please return to your vehicle," a traffic officer called out, trying to maintain some semblance of order in the growing chaos. "Just give me a minute," Jonas replied, keeping his focus on the dog. "I think something's seriously wrong here." The German Shepherd was right in front of him now, those intelligent brown eyes locked onto Jonas's face. Up close, the blood on its fur was unmistakable, and Jonas felt his old emergency response instincts kicking in. This wasn't just a stray causing trouble. This was a trained animal trying to communicate. "You trying to show us something?" Jonas asked softly. The dog whined and tugged gently at Jonas's sleeve, then took a few steps toward the bridge's edge before looking back expectantly. "You're crazy if you follow that dog," someone in the crowd called out. "It probably just got into a fight with another animal." Jonas stood slowly, aware of the dozens of eyes on him. The dog continued pulling him toward the edge of the bridge, its urgency obvious in every movement. Behind him, he could hear people muttering about lawsuits and liability, about being late for appointments, about the foolishness of following a strange dog. "Sir, we have animal control on the way," the traffic officer said, approaching with obvious concern. "Please return to your vehicle for your safety." Jonas looked down at the dog, then at the piece of fabric in its mouth. His mind flashed back to countless emergency calls where seconds had made the difference between life and death. The same instinct that had once guided him to check one more room or look behind one more door was screaming at him now. "I can't," he said firmly. "This dog isn't dangerous. It's trying to get help. Someone could be hurt." The German Shepherd barked once, as if confirming Jonas's words, then pulled more insistently at his sleeve. Jonas took a step forward, then another, following the dog's lead despite the growing chorus of protests behind him. "Your vehicle is blocking traffic," someone shouted. "Let the police handle it," called another voice. "You're just encouraging it," a woman in business attire yelled, her face red with frustration. Jonas blocked out the voices, focusing instead on the dog's determined movements. With each step away from the traffic jam, the German Shepherd's pace quickened, though it constantly looked back to ensure Jonas was still following. "I'm with you, buddy," Jonas assured the dog quietly. "Show me what's wrong." Behind him, he could hear the traffic officer radioing for backup, describing the situation in clipped tones. The evening light was starting to fade, casting long shadows across the bridge's surface. The dog led him toward a maintenance access point near the bridge's edge, its movements becoming more urgent. Jonas knew he might be making a fool of himself. His ex-wife's voice echoed in his head, reminding him of all the times his hero complex had put his own needs last. But the blood on the dog's fur was real, and that scrap of fabric spoke of violence rather than accident. Sometimes, he knew, being the only one willing to look closer was exactly what was needed. The crowd's angry voices began to fade as Jonas followed the German Shepherd away from the traffic jam. Whatever they found, or didn't find, at least he would know he had trusted his instincts. In his experience, it was better to look foolish than to ignore someone who might desperately need help. The dog moved with renewed purpose now that it had finally found someone willing to listen. Jonas quickened his pace to keep up, aware that they were leaving the relative safety of the crowd behind. But something in the animal's determined behavior told him he had made the right choice. Sometimes, he realized, the biggest difference wasn't in grand gestures or dramatic actions. It was in simply being willing to pay attention when others wouldn't. The German Shepherd led Jonas away from the crowded bridge and down a narrow maintenance path that hugged the structure's concrete edge. The evening air felt thick with moisture from the river below, making the metal railings slick under Jonas's grip. Zeus moved with increasing urgency, his nails clicking against the weathered surface as he guided Jonas deeper into the shadows beneath the bridge's massive support beams. They came to a halt at a heavy metal hatch set into the concrete. Zeus pawed at it frantically, whining and looking back at Jonas with desperate eyes. The blood on the dog's fur looked darker in the fading light, and Jonas noticed fresh scratches around the hatch's edges, signs of someone trying to force their way out. "This is it, huh?" Jonas muttered, examining the hatch. It was secured with a heavy padlock, but the mounting bracket showed signs of rust and wear. He glanced around quickly, spotting a length of steel pipe discarded nearby. "Stand back, boy." Jonas wedged the pipe against the bracket and threw his weight against it. The metal groaned but held. Gritting his teeth, he repositioned and tried again, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that used to accompany emergency calls. The bracket finally gave way with a sharp crack, the padlock and broken metal clattering down into the darkness below. Zeus barked urgently as Jonas heaved the hatch open. The shaft below was pitch black, with only the faintest gleam of emergency lighting far below. The musty smell of river water and concrete rose from the opening, along with something else, the metallic tang of blood. "Hello?" Jonas called down, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Is anyone down there?" A weak moan answered him, barely audible over the sound of dripping water. Zeus whined and paced anxiously at the edge of the opening. Jonas pulled out his phone, activating its flashlight feature, and directed the beam downward. The shaft descended at a steep angle, with metal rungs set into the wall, serving as a ladder. The bottom was lost in shadow, but he could see dark smears on the rungs that his experience told him were blood. "I'm coming down," he called out. "Hold on!" Jonas tucked his phone into his shirt pocket, positioning it to illuminate his way down. The rungs were slippery with moisture, and what he now knew for certain was blood. He descended carefully, aware that a fall in this narrow space could be fatal. Zeus followed, somehow finding purchase on the steep angle despite his 4 legs. About 20 feet down, Jonas's light caught a crumpled form pressed against the shaft's wall. A woman lay partially curled on her side, her breathing shallow and irregular. Blood had pooled beneath her, and her clothes were soaked through. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Jonas called out, hurrying down the last few rungs. He nearly slipped on the wet concrete at the bottom but caught himself against the wall. Zeus was already there, nuzzling the woman's face and whining softly. Jonas knelt beside her, his old training taking over as he assessed her condition. She was pale and cold to the touch, her pulse weak and thready under his fingers. A deep stab wound in her side had soaked her clothing with blood. She stirred slightly at his touch, her eyes flickering open but unfocused. "Stay with me," Jonas said firmly, shrugging off his flannel overshirt. He pressed it against the wound, applying direct pressure. "I'm going to help you, but I need you to stay awake. What's your name?" Sophia, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They took my phone." "Don't worry about that now," Jonas assured her. Zeus settled beside her head, offering warmth and comfort while Jonas worked. "I'm Jonas, and it looks like your dog here did an amazing job getting help." He could feel her shivering intensely, a bad sign given the amount of blood loss. The shaft was cold and damp, and she'd clearly been there for some time. Jonas needed to get her warm and get more help down here quickly. "Help!" he shouted up the shaft, his voice bouncing off the concrete walls. "We need emergency services down here. There's an injured woman." He turned back to Sophia, maintaining pressure on the wound while checking her responsiveness. "Stay with me, Sophia. Tell me about your dog. What's his name?" "Zeus," she managed, her eyes struggling to focus on Jonas's face. "He's such a good boy." "He sure is," Jonas agreed, trying to keep her engaged while listening for any response from above. "He stopped traffic on the bridge to get someone's attention. Smartest thing I've ever seen a dog do." Sophia's eyes started to drift closed again, and Jonas gently shook her shoulder. "No sleeping yet, Sophia. Stay with me. Tell me what happened. Who did this to you?" Her eyes snapped open, filled with sudden urgency. "The girls have to help the girls. Warehouse." "What girls?" Jonas asked, but Sophia's energy was fading again. He could feel her pulse growing weaker under his fingers. "Never mind. Just focus on staying awake. Help is coming." He shouted up the shaft again, this time hearing distant voices responding. The sound of approaching sirens filtered down from above. Zeus stood guard over them both, his ears alert to every sound in the confined space. "Hear that?" Jonas said to Sophia. "Help's almost here. You're going to be okay. Just hold on a little longer." The shaft was growing darker as evening settled in above, making the space feel even more claustrophobic. Jonas's legs were cramping from kneeling on the cold concrete, but he didn't dare move and risk losing pressure on the wound. He kept talking to Sophia, asking her simple questions and encouraging responses, no matter how faint. Finally, voices called down from above, and the beam of a powerful flashlight illuminated the shaft. "Fire rescue! Anyone down there?" "Yes," Jonas shouted back. "I've got an injured woman down here. Stab wound, severe blood loss. We need a basket stretcher and medics." The response was immediate and professional. Within minutes, rescue personnel were making their way down the shaft, bringing equipment and medical supplies with them. Jonas found himself explaining the situation while continuing to apply pressure, his hands now numb from the cold and strain. "Sir, we'll take it from here," a paramedic said, gently moving to replace Jonas's hands with fresh bandages. Another rescuer was already starting an IV line, while a third began setting up the basket stretcher. Jonas moved back slightly, giving them room to work, but staying close enough that Sophia could still see him. Zeus remained firmly by her side, refusing to be moved despite the cramped conditions. The dog's presence seemed to comfort Sophia, helping her stay conscious as the medical team worked. "You did good, boy," Jonas said softly to Zeus, watching the rescue operation unfold. "You did real good." The German Shepherd's tail thumped once against the concrete, but his eyes never left Sophia's face. Together they watched as the rescue team stabilized her and carefully secured her in the basket stretcher. The narrow shaft made the evacuation challenging, but the team worked with practiced efficiency. As they began the careful process of lifting Sophia out of the shaft, one of the paramedics turned to Jonas. "Sir, we're going to need you to give a statement to the police. They're waiting up top." Jonas nodded, his adrenaline finally starting to fade as the immediate crisis passed. He looked down at his blood-stained hands, remembering Sophia's words about the girls and the warehouse. Something told him this was far from over, but for now, he'd done what he could. He'd listened when no one else would, and it had made all the difference. The rescue team worked methodically to secure Sophia into the basket stretcher, their movements precise despite the tight confines of the maintenance shaft. Zeus had been remarkably cooperative with the emergency personnel, seeming to understand they were helping his beloved owner. But as they began preparations to lift Sophia out, something changed in the German Shepherd's demeanor. His ears suddenly pricked forward, and his nose twitched. Without warning, Zeus darted away from Sophia's side, something he hadn't done since leading Jonas to her. He pressed himself against a rusty grate set into the shaft's wall, letting out a series of urgent barks that echoed off the concrete. "Zeus, quiet!" Jonas called out, concerned the noise might interfere with the rescue operation. But Zeus ignored him completely, something he'd never done before. The dog's barking grew more insistent, and he began pawing at the grate with desperate intensity. One of the firefighters shone his flashlight towards the commotion. "What's got him so worked up?" Jonas moved closer to Zeus, noticing how the dog would bark, then press his nose to the grate, then bark again, the same pattern he'd used on the bridge to communicate emergency. I think he's trying to tell us something again." Sophia stirred on the stretcher, fighting against her weakness. "Listen, to him," she managed to whisper. "Zeus knows." The paramedic tried to keep her still. "Ma'am, you need to stay calm and not move." But Sophia's eyes were clear despite her condition. "Please, check. He knows." A young firefighter stepped forward, sweeping his light across the grate. "This looks like it connects to another maintenance space. Might be worth checking, just to be sure." He pulled out a pry bar from his utility belt and worked it into the grate's edge. Zeus backed up slightly but continued his urgent barking. The metal groaned as the firefighter applied pressure, then gave way with a sharp crack. As soon as the grate swung open, Zeus thrust his head into the opening, whining now instead of barking. The firefighter's light beam cut through the darkness of the revealed space. At first it seemed empty, just another dank service area. But then there was movement, and a small, terrified gasp. "Oh my God," the firefighter breathed. "There's people in here. Kids!" The beam illuminated two teenage girls huddled together in the cramped space, their clothes dirty and torn, their faces streaked with tears and grime. They squinted against the sudden light, pressing themselves further back against the wall in fear. "It's okay," Jonas said softly, recognizing the terror in their eyes. "We're here to help. You're safe now." One of the girls, perhaps 15 years old, spoke in a trembling voice. Is Miss Caro okay? We heard her earlier, but then everything went quiet." The paramedic working on Sophia looked up sharply. "You know these girls?" Sophia tried to nod, wincing at the movement. My cases. Missing 3 weeks." The revelation sent a ripple of shocked understanding through the rescue team. This wasn't just an assault anymore. They were looking at something much bigger, much darker. Additional emergency personnel were quickly called down. The girls were coaxed out of their prison, their movements stiff from being confined in the small space. They clung to each other, jumping at every sudden sound or movement. Zeus positioned himself between them and the shaft entrance, as if appointing himself their protector now that they were free. The older girl, trying to be brave for her sister, explained in halting words how they'd been moved there just hours ago. "They said they were coming back for us tonight, to take us somewhere else." She broke down then, her composure finally cracking. If Ms. Caro hadn't found this place, her sister, who hadn't spoken yet, suddenly darted forward toward Sophia's stretcher. Zeus made no move to stop her. "You came looking for us?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't give up." Sophia managed to reach out one weak hand, which the girl grasped like a lifeline. "Never," Sophia whispered back. "Never give up." The rescue operation had now doubled in scope and urgency. More police were arriving above, and the shaft was becoming crowded with emergency responders. The girls needed medical attention too. They were dehydrated and showing signs of abuse, but they refused to be separated from each other or moved away from Sophia. Zeus solved the problem by herding them gently to stay close to the stretcher, keeping them together while allowing the medical team to work. His presence seemed to comfort the sisters as much as it did Sophia, and the paramedics worked around the unusual group, recognizing that the dog's instincts had been right at every turn. As they finally began the careful process of lifting Sophia out of the shaft, the older sister turned to Jonas. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing your dog, for coming down here." Jonas shook his head. "Zeus is Sophia's dog, not mine. I just followed him when he asked for help." "But you listened," the girl insisted. "Nobody else did. They all just got mad about their cars." The simple truth of her words struck Jonas hard. How many people had ignored signs that something was wrong? How many had looked the other way when these girls disappeared? How many had cursed at Zeus on the bridge instead of wondering why a clearly well-trained dog would cause such chaos? The rescue team was now ready for the delicate process of extracting everyone from the shaft. Sophia would go up first, then the girls, with medical personnel accompanying each of them. Zeus watched the preparations intently, his posture alert but calmer now that everyone was under the protection of the authorities. The shaft that had held so much darkness was now full of light, activity, and hope. Sophia's determination, Zeus's loyalty, and Jonas's willingness to listen had combined to bring truth into the light. As the first responders continued their work, there was a shared understanding among everyone present. This night would have ended very differently if not for the insistence of one brave dog who refused to let his human's sacrifice be in vain. The morning news blazed across screens throughout the city. Aerial footage showed the aftermath of yesterday's bridge incident, with dozens of cars still being towed away. The headline scrolling beneath read, "Multi-car pileup caused by heroic dog." In his apartment, Jonas Keene watched the coverage with growing unease. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten in his hands, as reporters pieced together different versions of what had happened. They showed cell phone videos of Zeus darting through traffic, causing cars to swerve and collide. Then came the clips of Jonas himself, climbing over the bridge railing after the dog. "A reckless decision that could have cost lives," one commentator declared, her perfectly styled hair bouncing as she shook her head. While the dog's actions led to an incredible rescue, the human response only complicated an already dangerous situation. Jonas's phone buzzed again, another message from his ex-wife. "What were you thinking? This could affect your custody hearing." He set the phone face down, his stomach churning. They were painting him as an irresponsible thrill-seeker who had made the traffic incident worse. None of the reports mentioned how he'd helped stabilize Sophia, or how he'd stayed calm while helping the rescue workers. Instead, they focused on the property damage and delays his impulsive behavior had caused. The morning shows switched to their next segment, featuring a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and an expensive suit. The caption identified him as Marlowe Fisk, CEO of Fisk Security Solutions. "What we witnessed yesterday was a complete breakdown of order," Fisk said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "While we're all grateful for the heroic actions of the dog that led to these discoveries, we must address the chaos that followed. My company provides security for many facilities in that district, and I can assure you that this type of criminal activity is an anomaly." Jonas leaned forward, studying Fisk's face. Something about the man's carefully measured words set off warning bells. "We need to restore faith in our system," Fisk continued. "That means addressing how a social worker was able to conduct an unauthorized investigation, how an untrained civilian was allowed to interfere with emergency operations, and most importantly, how these criminals were able to operate in what should have been a secure area." The news anchor nodded sympathetically. "Mr. Fisk, your company has an excellent reputation for maintaining safety in the warehouse district. How do you respond to questions about security gaps that might have allowed this trafficking operation to exist?" Fisk's smile never wavered. "We're conducting our own internal review, but I want to be clear. The warehouse in question was not under our protection. In fact, we've been advocating for expanded security contracts in that exact area. This incident proves the necessity of professional oversight. The scene switched to the hospital, where Sophia was fighting for her life. A spokesperson stood at a podium, updating reporters on her condition. Ms. Caro remains in critical but stable condition following surgery. The knife missed major arteries, but she lost a significant amount of blood before rescue arrived. Her dog, Zeus, is being cared for by hospital staff and has been allowed brief supervised visits with his owner. The camera panned to show Zeus lying in the hospital corridor, his head on his paws but his eyes alert. Several nurses could be seen pausing to pat him as they passed. The contrast between his portrayal and Jonas's stung. In the next segment, they interviewed traffic safety experts who criticized Jonas's actions. Following an unknown dog into a restricted area, climbing over safety barriers, this sets a dangerous precedent. We're fortunate no one else was seriously injured. Jonas's phone buzzed again. This time it was his lawyer. Turn on Channel 8. They're running a different angle. He switched channels to find a smaller local station interviewing one of the teenage girl's parents. The mother was crying as she spoke. Everyone gave up looking. Everyone except Ms. Caro. And that man who followed Zeus, he could have walked away like everyone else did. My daughters are alive because 2 people and 1 brave dog chose to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. The father nodded firmly. They're calling him reckless? He's a hero. All 3 of them are heroes. Jonas felt a lump in his throat. At least someone understood. The coverage continued throughout the day. Marlo Fisk appeared on several more programs, each time positioning himself as a voice of reason and order. He spoke about his company's commitment to community safety, announced a new initiative to increase security patrols, and offered to fund additional training for social workers to prevent them from putting themselves at risk. In the hospital, Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness, unaware of the media storm. Zeus remained at his post outside her room, accepting treats and attention, but never straying far from her door. The nurses had created a makeshift bed for him using spare blankets, and someone had brought him a water bowl with his name written on it in bright markers. By evening, local talk shows were debating every angle of the story. They questioned the police response time, the effectiveness of social services, and the security of industrial areas. Through it all, Marlo Fisk's influence seemed to grow. He was quoted as an expert, praised for his professional insight, and held up as an example of corporate responsibility. Only a few people noticed how carefully he steered conversations away from certain topics. When asked about specific security protocols at nearby warehouses, he cited confidentiality agreements. When questioned about previous incidents in the area, he redirected to future prevention plans. Jonas spent the day fielding calls from reporters and dodging cameras outside his apartment. His delivery route had been temporarily suspended, pending review, and his custody hearing had been moved up due to recent events. The weight of public judgment pressed down on him, making him question his choices, even though he knew he'd done the right thing. Late that night, as coverage finally began to wind down, Jonas sat in his quiet apartment and replayed the events in his mind. He remembered the look in Zeus's eyes, the urgency in the dog's behavior. He thought about Sophia's determination to help those girls despite being dismissed and attacked. Most of all, he thought about Marlo Fisk's polished appearances and carefully crafted statements. Something wasn't adding up. But in the chaos of media coverage and public reaction, it was hard to see exactly what. The only thing Jonas knew for certain was that following Zeus down that shaft had been the right choice, no matter what the commentators said. He just hoped Sophia would recover soon enough to fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle. The news channels had moved on to other stories. But their earlier coverage played on repeat in Jonas's mind. Marlo Fisk's words about unauthorized investigations and security gaps echoed with hidden meaning. Somewhere beneath the surface of this media frenzy lay a darker truth, waiting to be uncovered. Detective Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen, fragments of video files slowly reconstructing themselves. The auto backup feature on Sophia's smashed phone had managed to save pieces of what she'd recorded that night. The detective's eyes narrowed as grainy figures moved through the dim warehouse lighting. "There," she muttered, tapping a key to pause the frame. "That's definitely one of Fisk's security uniforms." Across the desk, Jonas leaned forward, his coffee going cold beside him. After 3 days of being portrayed as either a reckless troublemaker or an accidental hero, he'd finally been asked to help with the investigation. The footage was blurry, but he could make out the distinctive patches on the guard's jacket. "Those are the same uniforms I see at delivery checkpoints," he confirmed. "But something's off about how they're moving. It's like they're trying not to be seen, even though they're supposed to be official security." Detective Chen nodded, making another note. "The timestamps match what the sisters told us, 8:30 p.m., exactly when they said the van arrived." The teen sisters, Amy and Rachel, were safely in protective custody now. Their statements had been careful, detailed, and devastating. They described being moved between locations, always guarded by men in Fisk security uniforms. The guards had used official credentials to bypass checkpoints and access restricted areas. "Play it again," Jonas requested. "From the beginning." The reconstructed video showed Sophia's careful approach to the warehouse. Her phone had captured whispered conversations, the sound of engines, and finally the moment she was discovered. The attack itself was mostly darkness and confusion, but the audio remained clear, including several voices giving orders. "That's him," Jonas said suddenly. "That's Marlo Fisk's voice." Detective Chen replayed the segment, increasing the volume. Through the chaos, a commanding voice could be heard. "Get her out of sight. Use the maintenance shaft. Make it look like an accident." The detective's fingers flew across her keyboard, noting timestamps and creating markers. This matches what we found in Sophia's case files, too. Every time she reported suspicious activity around missing girls, it overlapped with Fisk Security's patrol zones. Jonas remembered Sophia's frustration when no one would listen to her concerns. Now, piece by piece, the evidence was proving she'd been right all along. The trafficking network hadn't just operated under Fisk's nose, it had operated with his direct involvement. "There's more," Detective Chen said, pulling up another window. "When Zeus caused that traffic pileup on the bridge, he didn't just help us find Sophia and the sisters, he disrupted their whole operation." She showed Jonas a map of traffic cameras from that day. The backed-up traffic had blocked 3 major routes out of the city. "We've identified at least 2 other vehicles connected to Fisk that were forced to turn back. Based on the sisters' statements, those vehicles were probably carrying more girls." Jonas felt sick. The scale of it was staggering. "How did no one notice before?" "People noticed," Chen replied grimly. "They just couldn't prove it. Sophia was getting close, though. Look at this." She opened Sophia's recovered case files. Carefully organized notes showed patterns of disappearances, locations of suspicious activity, and lists of Fisk security employees who appeared repeatedly in witness statements. Sophia had been methodically building a case, gathering evidence bit by bit. That's why they tried to kill her, Jonas realized. She wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was about to expose everything. At that moment, Jonas's phone buzzed. It was a message from the hospital. Sophia was awake and asking to speak with him. Detective Chen noticed his expression change. "Go," she said. "I'll keep working on these files. And Jonas, be careful. Fisk knows we're closing in." At the hospital, Jonas found Zeus still maintaining his vigil outside Sophia's room. The dog's tail wagged at Jonas's approach, but his alert posture never wavered. Inside, Sophia was pale but alert, propped up on pillows. "Thank you," she said as soon as she saw him, "for believing Zeus, for believing me." Jonas pulled a chair close to her bed. "The police are piecing everything together. Your videos, your notes, it's all pointing to Fisk." Sophia nodded weakly. "I knew it was him. I kept seeing his guards in places they shouldn't be, hearing his name mentioned by scared girls who'd escaped, but he was too powerful. No one would look closely enough." "They're looking now," Jonas assured her. "The sisters, Amy and Rachel, they've identified several of his workers. And the traffic jam that day? It stopped at least 2 more vehicles they think were carrying girls." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "All those girls. I tried so hard to protect them, to make someone listen." "You did protect them," Jonas said firmly. "Your evidence, your dedication, it's going to bring down Fisk's whole operation. The police have proof now, real proof." Sophia reached for the water glass beside her bed, and Jonas helped her take a sip. Through the window they could see Zeus standing guard, his ears perking up at every passing sound. "He hasn't left, you know," Sophia said, looking at her faithful companion. "The nurses say he only moves from that spot for quick walks when they take him out." Jonas smiled. "He's a hero. The whole city knows it now." "So are you," Sophia said quietly. "Even though they're trying to paint you as reckless, you chose to help when no one else would." Before Jonas could respond, Detective Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression urgent. "We found something else in the files," she said. "Something big." She held up her tablet, showing them a series of recovered photos from Sophia's phone. They revealed a complex network of shipping manifests, all bearing Fisk Securities' logo, all disguising human cargo as ordinary freight. "This is it," Chen said. "This is what ties everything together. Sophia, your documentation is incredible. You built an entire case without them even realizing." Sophia's hands trembled as she looked at the images. "There was so much more," she said. "In my apartment, hidden in my files. I kept everything." Detective Chen's eyes lit up. "Where? We can get a warrant right now." As Sophia described the location of her hidden evidence, Jonas watched Zeus through the window, still standing guard. The dog had started it all. His desperate attempt to save Sophia had cracked open a case that might otherwise have remained hidden. The pieces were falling into place now, faster and faster. Marlo Fisk's carefully constructed public image was about to shatter, brought down by the combined efforts of a dedicated social worker, a delivery driver who chose to help, and a dog who refused to give up. Detective Chen was already on her phone, requesting the warrant. Jonas could see the relief in Sophia's face, knowing that her years of work were finally leading to justice. The truth was emerging, one recovered file at a time, and not even Marlo Fisk's influence could stop it now. The morning sun barely penetrated the heavy clouds as Jonas Keene stood in the courthouse parking lot, his worn work boots scuffing against the wet pavement. His ex-wife Laura's words still rang in his ears from their custody hearing moments ago. "Your Honor, my ex-husband's recent behavior demonstrates a pattern of reckless decisions," she had said, her voice steady and prepared. "First leaving his stable EMT position, and now deliberately involving himself in a dangerous criminal investigation. This isn't the kind of environment Maddie needs." Jonas leaned against his delivery van, the metal cold against his back. His phone buzzed again, another notification. He didn't need to look to know what it was. The online attacks had been relentless for the past 3 days. The latest exclusive article had painted him as an attention-seeking ex-EMT who had purposely worsened the bridge accident to restart his failed rescue career. Someone had dug up the old incident that had driven him from emergency services, a mistake during a high-pressure situation that had haunted him ever since. The article twisted the facts, making it seem like he'd been fired rather than resigned. His phone rang. It was Detective Chen. "Jonas," her voice was tense. "Marcus Taylor is gone." Jonas's stomach dropped. Marcus had been one of their strongest witnesses, a former warehouse worker who had agreed to testify about Fisk's operation. "Gone how?" Jonas asked, although he already knew. "Left a note saying he couldn't go through with it. His apartment's cleared out. We can't trace his phone." Chen paused. "This has Fisk written all over it." Jonas slumped further against the van. Marcus had been crucial to their case. His testimony would have directly linked Fisk to the trafficking operation. Without him, they were back to circumstantial evidence and incomplete records. "How's Sophia?" he asked, trying to focus on something positive. "Still recovering, but worried. She knows losing Marcus is a major blow." Chen sighed. "Listen, Jonas, maybe you should step back for a while. These attacks on you, they're coordinated. Fisk is trying to discredit everyone involved in the investigation." Jonas ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from his supervisor at the delivery company. "Need to discuss recent publicity issues. Meeting tomorrow morning." The hits just kept coming. Jonas knew what that meeting would be about. The company wouldn't want the liability of an employee making headlines for all the wrong reasons. He drove his regular delivery route that afternoon, but his mind was elsewhere. At each stop, he noticed people looking at him differently. Some whispered as he passed, others pointedly avoided eye contact. The online smear campaign was working, painting him as an unstable glory hound who had endangered lives on the bridge. When he pulled up to his apartment that evening, his neighbor Mrs. Reynolds was waiting by the mailboxes. Her usual warm smile was replaced with concern. "Jonas, dear," she said, holding out a crumpled paper. "Someone put these up around the building. I've been taking them down, but..." It was a printed screenshot of one of the worst online articles, with "Danger to our community" scrawled across it in red marker. Jonas's hands shook as he took it. "Thanks, Mrs. Reynolds," he managed. Inside his apartment, Jonas sat in the dark, staring at his phone. The custody hearing had gone badly. Laura's lawyer had effectively used the recent publicity against him. The judge had seemed sympathetic to their concerns about his stability and judgment. A text from Laura appeared. "Maddie asked about the things she heard at school about you. What am I supposed to tell her, Jonas?" That broke him. The thought of his daughter hearing these lies, being teased about them at school, it was too much. Jonas felt the walls closing in. Everything he'd worked for since leaving emergency services, the steady job, the joint custody arrangement, rebuilding his life, it was all crumbling. He opened his contact list, thumb hovering over Detective Chen's number. Maybe she was right. Maybe he should step back, try to salvage what was left of his life. Sophia was recovering. The police had their evidence, even if Marcus was gone. They didn't really need him anymore. His phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. Warily, he answered. "Mr. Keene." The voice was smooth, professional. "Marlowe Fisk." "I think it's time we talked." Jonas's throat went dry. "I have nothing to say to you." "Come now." Fisk's tone was almost friendly. "I think we both know this situation has gotten out of hand. Your reputation, your job, your custody arrangement, these are important things. Things that could be protected with the right approach." Jonas's free hand clenched into a fist. "Are you threatening me?" "Quite the opposite. I'm offering you a way out, a statement from you expressing doubts about your initial assumptions, questioning Sophia Caro's stability. It would go a long way toward setting things right." The words hung in the air like poison. Jonas thought about Sophia in her hospital bed, still recovering from Fisk's attempt to silence her. He thought about the teenage sisters they'd rescued, about Marcus disappearing into the night, about all the other girls still missing. "You know what I see, Fisk?" Jonas's voice was low, steady. "I see someone desperate, someone watching their whole operation fall apart, throwing money at online trolls and trying to scare people into silence. But it won't work. The truth is already out there." "That's disappointing," Fisk replied, his friendly tone evaporating. "I thought you were smarter than this. Think about your daughter, Mr. Keene. Think about—" Jonas hung up. His hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger. Pure, clarifying anger that burned away his doubts. He dialed Detective Chen. "I just got a call from Fisk," he said when she answered. "He tried to buy me off, threatened my custody arrangement." "We'll add witness tampering to the charges," Chen replied grimly. "Are you okay?" Jonas looked at the photo of Maddie on his wall, her gap-toothed smile, her eyes bright with trust and love. "No," he admitted, "but I'm done letting him win. Record every call I get, track every threat, document everything. We're going to show exactly who Marlowe Fisk really is." After hanging up, Jonas sat in his darkened apartment, feeling the weight of his decision. His life might be in shambles, his reputation under attack, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. The girls trapped in Fisk's trafficking network needed someone to stand up for them. Sophia had tried alone and nearly died for it. But she wasn't alone anymore. Jonas would weather this storm, no matter how hard it got. Because sometimes doing the right thing meant losing everything else, and being strong enough to accept that cost. Detective Brenda Holcomb's footsteps echoed through the hospital corridor as she approached Jonas, who sat slumped in an uncomfortable plastic chair. His eyes were red from a lack of sleep, his shoulders heavy with the weight of recent events. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, settling into the chair beside him. Jonas managed a weak smile. "Thanks. You really know how to cheer a guy up." "I'm not here to cheer you up." Holcomb pulled out a thick folder. "I'm here because we're making progress, and I need you focused." She spread out surveillance photos showing various warehouses. "Zeus has been helping us track scent trails. That dog of Sophia's is something else. Led us to 3 different locations connected to Fisk's operation." Jonas straightened slightly. "The press is still—" "The press can go to hell," Holcomb cut him off. "Listen to me, Keene. 20 years I've watched girls disappear. 20 years of dead ends and bureaucratic roadblocks. Now we finally have something real, and you're letting some online trolls shake you?" "It's not just the trolls," Jonas said quietly. "My daughter will be proud of her father when this is over." Holcomb's voice softened slightly. "Sometimes doing the right thing comes with a cost. But that's what makes it matter." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Caro is awake. She's asking for both of you." They found Sophia propped up in bed, pale but alert. Zeus lay protectively at her feet, his tail thumping against the mattress when they entered. Despite her condition, Sophia's eyes were sharp and determined. "Detective," she said, then turned to Jonas. "And you must be the one Zeus chose to trust." Jonas shifted uncomfortably. "I just followed him. Anyone would have—" "No," Sophia interrupted. "They wouldn't. I saw the traffic footage. You were the only one who really looked at him. The only one who listened." She reached for a tablet on her bedside table, wincing at the movement. "I need to show you both something." Her fingers moved across the screen, pulling up files from her cloud backup. "Before they attacked me, I managed to upload some of what I recorded. The quality isn't great, but..." The video showed shadowy figures moving between vehicles, hushed conversations about shipments and inventory. Holcomb leaned forward, her expression intense. "That's Marcus Chen talking to Fisk's head of security," she said. "No wonder Marcus disappeared." "There's more," Sophia said. "Background conversations, license plates, patterns of movement, everything they did, thinking no one was watching." Jonas watched the grainy footage, feeling his resolve strengthen. "This is what they tried to kill you for." "And failed." Sophia's voice was steel. "Now they're trying to discredit you instead. We can't let them succeed." Zeus raised his head, ears perking up at voices in the hallway. Holcomb moved to check, then relaxed. "Just orderlies." "He's been amazing," Sophia said, scratching Zeus behind the ears. "Detective Holcomb's been bringing him to different locations, letting him track scents from the bridge scene. He found a shipping container yesterday that had clearly been used to transport people." "The evidence is piling up," Holcomb confirmed. "We just need to hold the line a little longer, keep the pressure on." Jonas looked between these two women, one a veteran detective who refused to give up, the other a social worker who'd risked everything to expose the truth. He thought of Zeus, who'd literally jumped into traffic to save his person. "Okay," he said finally. "What do you need me to do?" Sophia's eyes met his, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition, the beginning of trust. "We need you to stay strong," she said simply. "To keep telling the truth, no matter what they throw at you. Can you do that?" Jonas thought of Maddie again, but this time differently. What kind of example did he want to set for his daughter? That you back down when things get hard? Or that you stand up for what's right, even when it costs you? "Yes," he said. "I can do that." Zeus got up and padded over to Jonas, resting his head on Jonas's knee. The gesture felt like acceptance, like welcome into something larger than himself. "Then let's take him down," Holcomb said, gathering her files. Together. The late afternoon sun slanted through the hospital window, painting the room in warm light. Despite everything, the threats, the smear campaign, the personal cost, Jonas felt stronger than he had in days. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore, and maybe that would make all the difference. Zeus's nose pressed against the ground as he moved in precise zigzag patterns across the warehouse district. Detective Holcomb held his leash loosely, watching as the German Shepherd followed an invisible trail only he could detect. Behind them, Jonas pushed Sophia's wheelchair, her tablet balanced on her lap as she cross-referenced locations with her salvaged footage. "He's got something," Holcomb said, as Zeus's head snapped up, ears forward. The dog led them to a nondescript door, heavily padlocked. Sophia tapped rapidly on her tablet, pulling up a grainy video clip. "This matches. Look at the marking on the upper right corner, same scratch pattern." Jonas leaned in to study the footage. "That's definitely Marlowe's second-in-command entering with a group of girls." "Third warehouse this week," Holcomb noted, marking the location on her map. "Zeus is helping us build a complete picture of their operation." Sophia zoomed in on another clip. "The timestamps show a pattern. They move people through these locations like clockwork, never keeping them in one place for more than 48 hours. Zeus whined softly, pawing at the ground near the door. Holcomb knelt to examine what he'd found, a small piece of torn fabric. "Evidence bag," she called, and Jonas quickly handed her one. "This could be from one of the missing girls." Sophia's fingers flew across her tablet. "I've been piecing together fragments from my cloud backup. The files were corrupted when they smashed my phone, but I'm seeing a clear route." She turned the screen to show them. They use these 3 warehouses as staging points, moving east to west along the river. "Hitting the major transport hubs," Holcomb added, comparing Sophia's map to her own. "Clever bastard. He's been hiding his operation in plain sight, using his security company's legitimate shipping routes as cover." Zeus suddenly tensed, a low growl rumbling in his throat. They all froze, listening. Distant voices carried across the empty lot. "Behind the containers," Jonas whispered, quickly wheeling Sophia to safety. Two men in Marlowe's security uniforms walked past their hiding spot, deep in conversation. "Boss wants everything cleared out by tomorrow night," one was saying. "Says we can't risk leaving anything behind now that they're sniffing around." "What about the girls in Building 7? "Moving them first. Then we torch the whole place. Make it look like electrical failure." Sophia's hand found Jonas's arm, gripping tight. They waited until the men's footsteps faded before emerging. "Building 7, Holcomb said grimly. "That's the main warehouse by the bridge." "Where they were keeping the sisters we found," Sophia added, her face pale. "There could be more girls trapped inside." Zeus paced anxiously, picking up on their tension. Jonas knelt beside him, scratching his ears to calm him. "How much time do we have?" "Not enough for a warrant," Holcomb said, checking her watch. "And if we move in without one, Marlowe's lawyers will tear any evidence apart." "Those girls don't have time for legal procedures," Sophia protested. She pulled up another video clip. "Look at this. I caught glimpse of an internal layout through a window. There's a sub-basement. If there are girls still in there when they start the fire..." Jonas stood up, determination settling over his features. "Then we document everything, right now. Detective, you have probable cause with what we just heard. Sophia's footage shows the pattern. And Zeus..." He looked down at the dog, who stood alert and ready. "Zeus can lead us straight to where they're keeping them." Holcomb nodded slowly. "I'll call for backup, but quietly. We move in at dawn, before they can start the evacuation." She turned to Sophia. "I need every scrap of footage you've got. Everything that shows their patterns, their security rotations, access points." "Already compiling it," Sophia said, her fingers never stopping their work on the tablet. "Zeus found us 3 main locations. My footage confirms regular movement between them. The timing, the security patterns. It's all here." Zeus pressed against her leg, as if sensing her distress about the trapped girls. She reached down to touch his head. "We'll get them out, boy. You helped us connect all the pieces. Now we just have to move fast enough." The setting sun cast long shadows across the warehouse district. Tomorrow would bring either a decisive victory or devastating loss. Time was running out, but thanks to Zeus's tracking abilities and Sophia's determined documentation, they finally had Marlowe's entire operation mapped out. They just had to survive long enough to use it. The first wisps of smoke curled from beneath Building 7's doors just before dawn. Jonas's heart pounded as he and Detective Holcomb approached the warehouse, their footsteps muffled on the wet pavement. Zeus padded silently beside them, his ears pricked forward. "Movement inside," Holcomb whispered, drawing her weapon. "Second floor, eastern corner." A flash of orange light bloomed behind the grimy windows. The smoke thickened, seeping through every crack. Jonas felt his throat tighten, not just from the acrid fumes, but from memories of past rescues gone wrong. They burst through the side door, Zeus taking point. The warehouse interior was already filling with smoke, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Stacks of crates and shipping containers created a maze-like layout. "Police!" Holcomb's voice echoed. "Come out with your hands up!" A gunshot cracked in response, sending splinters flying from a nearby crate. Jonas ducked behind a container, his heart hammering. Through the thickening haze, he caught glimpses of figures moving on the upper level. Zeus barked sharply, turning toward a metal staircase that led down. The basement, where the girls would be trapped. "Go," Holcomb ordered, providing cover fire as more shots rang out. "I'll hold them here until backup arrives." Jonas followed Zeus down the stairs, the smoke growing denser with each step. The heat was becoming unbearable. Somewhere above, they heard the growing roar of flames consuming the building's old wooden beams. Zeus led him through the maze-like basement, past locked doors and empty cells, until they reached a heavy steel door. Inside, terrified voices called for help. The lock was electronic, and without power, the door wouldn't budge. Jonas could hear sirens in the distance, but the fire was spreading too fast. They were running out of time. Jonas slammed his shoulder against the steel door repeatedly, desperation building as the smoke grew thicker. A loud crack from above made him look up. And there was Marlowe Fisk, emerging from the smoke like a nightmare. "You should have stayed out of this, Keen," Marlowe growled, charging forward. They collided hard, grappling on the narrow metal catwalk suspended above the growing inferno. The heat was intense, making the railing hot to touch. Jonas struggled to maintain his footing on the increasingly unstable platform. Marlowe, with cold efficiency, got the upper hand. He forced Jonas backward, pressing him against the railing that groaned under their combined weight. The drop below was at least 20 feet, with flames licking upward hungrily. "It's over," Marlowe sneered, pushing harder. Just as Jonas felt his feet leaving the catwalk, a blur of fur and fury launched through the smoke. Zeus's powerful jaws clamped onto Marlowe's arm, drawing a howl of pain. The German Shepherd's attack gave Jonas the opening he needed. He surged forward, tackling Marlowe to the catwalk floor. Detective Holcomb appeared through the smoke, weapon drawn. "Don't move, Fisk! You're under arrest!" Below, the sound of firefighters breaking through the steel door echoed up, followed by cries of relief from the rescued girls. Marlowe lay subdued, Zeus keeping a watchful eye on him, while Holcomb secured the handcuffs. The weeks following Marlowe's arrest unfolded like a healing spring. In the courthouse, Sophia's testimony rang clear and true, her quiet strength filling the chamber as she detailed the trafficking network. Her evidence, combined with the rescued girls' statements, ensured Marlowe and his accomplices faced lengthy prison sentences. For Jonas, watching his daughter Lily's face light up as she read newspaper headlines about his heroism meant everything. "My dad helped save those girls," she told her friends proudly, clutching the articles. Their weekend visits grew longer, filled with new trust and understanding. Sophia's physical wounds healed steadily, though some scars would remain. She returned to work with renewed purpose, implementing better protection protocols for at-risk teens. Zeus became a regular visitor at Jonas's apartment, where the three of them often shared quiet evenings. "You know," Sophia said one evening, watching Zeus doze at their feet, "sometimes the worst moments bring out the best connections." Jonas nodded, understanding perfectly. They had all emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as a family forged in courage and compassion. His daughter, his new friends, and a future bright with possibility, all because he'd chosen to trust a desperate dog on a bridge. Detective Holcomb visited occasionally, bringing updates about the rescued girls' recovery progress. Each small victory in their healing journey felt like another light pushing back the darkness Marlowe had created. Through therapy and support, the young survivors began rebuilding their lives, their resilience a testament to the human spirit. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.